All right, can everyone hear me? Test, test.
Yep.
Great. All right, well, I would like to introduce everybody back to Luke Youngblood again. This is his third session of the day. He has been a champion of Trustless 2020. And yeah, he will be teaching you how to identify which proof-of-stake networks are worth mining. So you take it away, Luke.
Hey, everyone. Welcome again. Previously, I was coming to you live from my Lamborghini garage, but today I'm in the, tonight I'm in the Gold Bank Vault in my Swiss Alps location. Not really, but it's kind of fun. So I'm here to share with you more info about how to identify which proof-of-stake networks are worth mining or validating for. And just a little bit of background about me in case you don't already know me. In early 2018, I helped the Tezos Foundation launch their network. I run the validators for the Tezos Foundation. And then in 2019, I joined Coinbase Custody to help launch staking products and services for Coinbase. And we're really excited to have launched staking rewards last year. So that's been a lot of fun. And I'm also the founder and CEO of my own company, Blockscale. And I've been really passionate about crypto since about 2011 when I was mining Bitcoin. So I've actually been mining crypto for quite some time, and validating is just a new form of mining. So really excited to be a part of it. The thing that's interesting to me, I think, about crypto is that it's this intersection between cybersecurity and finance, and I really like the intersection of those two things. So I'm excited to share more details with you about how you can choose what networks to validate for. I am not seeing anything in the chat window, so I'm just going to say hi there and make sure I can see, make sure people are in the chat. I just wasn't sure if I was missing messages, but if you're in the chat window, say hi or something, and I'll answer questions at the end. Hey, Leo. Great. Okay, cool. Chat is working. All right. So where we are today is that proof of stake is really accelerating in 2020. Last year, proof of stake kind of proved itself with the launch of big networks like Cosmos. And but in 2019, only 8% of the crypto by market cap consisted of proof of stake currencies or adopted a proof of stake consensus model. By the end of this year, 2020, with the launch of Ethereum 2.0, it is expected to grow to 20%. So this implies $1 billion in staking rewards across all of these proof of stake networks. And that's about $100 million in annual fee revenue for miners or validators. So that's a pretty significant opportunity for all of us to go out and capture some of that $100 million in fees. And I'm excited to be a part of that. But what's different about these new networks that are launching in 2020 and the networks that came before that were alternatives to Bitcoin, like Ethereum and Tezos that had early crowd sales, they had really high participation rates in their crowd sales. So the Ethereum crowd sale had thousands of participants. So at launch, Ethereum was pretty heavily decentralized. There were thousands of wallets. Tezos is very similar, over 10,000 participants in the crowd sale and thousands of wallets at launch. So they're pretty decentralized already, and they didn't have this challenge that these newer networks are mostly funded by venture capital firms. And that leads to greater centralization. There's just fewer large investors in these new networks. So the network operators and the asset issuers have to figure out new ways to decentralize their token supplies at launch. Now, one proven way of doing this is what Cosmos has done with Game of Stakes. Now, Game of Stakes was a highly incentivized test net that allowed them to not only get validators experience with the platform, with the network, but also to decentralize the token supply at launch. So the validators that weren't investors in the Cosmos crowd sale could actually participate and stake at launch. This is a kind of hard problem to solve. And I think Cosmos is a really great model for how to solve it in a good way. So what kind of problems do these try to solve, these incentivized testnets? First, really the goal of any proof of stake network is to be maintained by a multitude of these independent, geographically diversified validators. We want the voting power to ideally be evenly distributed across these validators. This minimizes the risks of centralization, cartel formation, and because these early backers are primarily investors, venture capital firms, they're just not as decentralized. So token grants or awards actually incentivize node operators to join and engage with these test networks, to optimize your infrastructure, to increase your security, your monitoring, your alerting. They also help to decentralize these networks by awarding the tokens to the validators that show the most competency. So if you're the most capable at running a validator, you've shown you have good uptime, you're not missing votes and signatures, those are the exact people that should be getting the grants to help decentralize the network, because they've proven they know how to operate the network and they know how to run validators at a professional level. And then the last thing is that these token grants also help to find issues before mainnet launch when real tokens are at stake. So if these networks can find bugs, find security vulnerabilities prior to launch, everything about the network will be more secure, more stable, and easier to trust. So there's real reasons why all these incentivized testnets are launching. And this is a really exciting time to become a part of the validator community. And so I'm really excited to be part of this conference and share some of this information with you. And I do want to acknowledge Game of Stakes, which is really where it all started, because I do think that Zaki and Jack and Sunny and the others at Cosmos really had a brilliant idea to help decentralize their network at launch. It was a hard problem to solve, and I'm sure they had many brainstorming sessions about how do we decentralize the token supply so there isn't just 3 or 4 validators with 20% stake each. And they came up with this creative idea, and it was super scrappy, but it worked, and it's become a model that everyone else has implemented. And so I want to kind of share my personal experience with Game of Stakes, because I think it's pretty typical of most of us that participated. Now, I didn't participate like a very professional validator like Acertus One did, where they actually built a business model around it, and they had data center hardware and all of the brilliant tooling that they've built. But I did participate in my free time as a hobbyist, and I participated in a series of 6 Game of Stakes testnets from December 2018 to January 2019. So initially, we thought Game of Stakes would just be a single testnet. We would run it for a few weeks. Everything would be great. We would shut it down and launch the mainnet, the Cosmos Hub mainnet. But what actually happened is we ended up finding a lot of interesting problems throughout running these testnets, and I think it really helped the Cosmos team to solidify their network prior to launch. So I spent about 100 hours setting up my validator and my Sentry nodes, and participating in coordinated network upgrades. So with Byzantine fault tolerance, remember earlier we've talked about how you must have 2/3 of the validators online in order for consensus. 2/3 of the validators must sign a vote for every block to be finalized. So when you do a coordinated testnet upgrade, you basically have to get everyone online at once. And this is a global community. So we have validators in Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and time zones don't always work for all of us. So there were times when I had to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning to participate in a coordinated network reset. There were other times when people in Europe had to wake up at bad hours as well. So the Cosmos team did a great job of trying to share the pain evenly. But I also wrote a lot of and maintained a lot of scripts to withdraw rewards and redelegate. It turned out that participating in Game of Stakes was kind of interesting because the rate of inflation was accelerated so high that it was simulating years of network activity and staking in just a few weeks period of time. And so in order to really come out ahead on the leaderboard, you had to be able to constantly withdraw your rewards and redelegate them to your validator. And also, because it was an adversarial testnet and people were censoring transactions, it was very challenging to make sure your withdraw redelegate transactions got into the mempool and got confirmed in blocks. So that was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of challenge, and it helped to kind of build that strength as operating a Cosmos validator. So that's another important part of Game of Stakes. But it's important to note that my only cost was my time. I got free cloud credits from AWS Activate. And so whether you're a student or a hobbyist or a professional, you should know that the cloud providers have free credit programs available to you. You do not have to pay for infrastructure to launch your validator startup. You can actually go to Amazon or Google, and even through your university or through whatever accelerator you might be using, whatever incubator you might be using, you can talk to them, and they'll give you up to $100,000 in free cloud credits that you can use And you can pay for all kinds of cloud services, whether you're running nodes, whether you're buying cloud HSMs. Some of these networks even require GPUs. So maybe you need to pay for some really expensive GPU-backed cloud instances. So just know that these cloud credits exist, and they are a very easy and risk-free way to launch a validator as a service without a lot of risk of your personal capital. Now, I didn't win any of the grand prizes, but I was an uptime leader and I won 1,500 atoms, so that was kind of fun. And more importantly, I was able to become one of the 100 validators at mainnet launch. So even though I would have had no way to actually purchase atoms, there was no exchange that was selling atoms that I'm aware of at the time. So there would have been no way I could have become a validator at launch. Otherwise, by getting that 1,500 atom grant, that allowed me to self-bond and become a validator at launch. So the other thing that happened is that after launch, I received a 330,000 atom delegation from All In Bits or Tendermint. Now, this was part of a decentralization effort they did to help the network in the early days make sure it was decentralized, because they were trying to avoid having very large validators accumulate too much staking power. And so for smaller hobbyist validators like myself that have proven we know how to run a node and keep it operational and secure, we were still able to get small delegations that could help us to offset the costs of running those nodes. And to this day, I continue to validate on Cosmos. I'm number 76, so I'm not gonna be in the top 10 anytime soon. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's actually been a great learning experience because I've been able to apply the skills I learned running Cosmos validators as a hobbyist to my job at Coinbase. And so I think this also gives you a great entry point if you want to work for an exchange or a large validator as a service startup. If you want to go work for Bison Trails or one of these large staking companies as well. They'd love to hire someone with actual experience running a validator. So I just wanted to share my personal story, and then we'll get into the criteria you can actually use to evaluate these different networks. But here's an incomplete list. I'm sure I've left a few off of incentivized testnets. I think everybody in the community saw how successful Game of Stakes was, and they really wanted to emulate this. It helped bootstrap an entire community of validators. People built a lot of great tooling around Game of Stakes. There were block explorers built and other tools. People also became real champions, and it helped decentralize the network at launch. So it was a win-win for all the parties, for the Cosmos team, the Tendermint All In Bits team, Interchain Foundation, and all the validators that participated. And everyone wants to emulate this. It's a great model. So you can see all these that are launching, and I'll send this presentation out so you can click on all these links later. But how do you identify which ones you want to participate in? So there's really no shortcut for it, but you kind of have to do your research. So the first thing is to kind of find out what it really costs to run a validator on these networks. And you want to try to figure out what your all-in costs are. So those are things like cloud and data center costs. Now, you might not know what size of servers you need until you actually run these test nets. But that's another great way to find out how expensive it's going to be to validate on these test nets. They have wildly different compute requirements. Some require very large amounts of compute, and some require very little amounts of compute, very small amounts of compute. So by running these test nets, it'll give you a chance to actually figure out what are your real requirements. So when I actually have to pay that AWS bill in a year or so when your credits run out, then you'll know if you're going to be profitable or not. Find out, Sergio, no, I'm going to answer all the questions later, but quick answer is no, I didn't make 1.4 million. We'll talk more about that when we get to the Q&A session. But find out what bond or deposits might be required to stake. Most of these networks require you to self-bond. And if you get a grant for participating in the test nets, you should know one thing. And this was a goal of Game of Stakes, and I think it's a goal of all of these incentivized test nets. They want to award minimal grants to everyone that meaningfully participates. So what that means is, if you logged into the network once, you tried running a validator for a few hours and you shut it down and then you never logged back in again, you're probably not going to get a grant. But if you participated and you went through the network upgrades, you kept your validator online to the best of your ability, even if you had a few outages or downtimes, it happens to all of us. That's why we run these test nets, to learn them. You're probably going to get a token grant. Now, I can't guarantee that, but you're probably going to get a minimal token grant like my 1,500 atoms, and that'll give you enough to self-bond. And so you might not need to put up your own bond when you launch. Also, find out about specialized hardware. So like servers, HSMs that might be required to stake securely. Some of these networks require GPUs. Some of them might require secure enclaves and other things like that. So find out if there's specialized hardware that might require additional investments. And then try to quantify the human costs. Your time isn't free. You might want to have some friends work with you as well. You might want to hire some contractors or employees as well that have expertise in certain areas. So figure out what those costs are. You're going to probably need some legal and accounting and tax expertise to set up your validator as a service startup as well. So budget a little bit for those expenses as well to launch your company. And so really just understand your total cost to operate a validator. It's really the only way to know if you're able to be profitable or not. And so these are some of like the early cost estimates for Tezos. Now this isn't complete by any means, but this is just to show you how I kind of started to estimate what it would take to operate the validators for the Tezos Foundation. This is just at a high level. This doesn't capture a lot of the human costs and things like that. So there are some really interesting proof of stake network dynamics out there. So did you know that some proof of stake networks don't have slashing conditions? Coda Protocol is a great example of this. So this might reduce the cost and complexity of validator operations. And it might also reduce the risk of catastrophic loss of deposits or bonds. So you also need to research though and find out, is this network still secure? Is it still decentralized? If there's no slashing condition, how are they able to solve that? And in many cases, you can actually solve this if you have good cryptography and good fundamental design of the protocol. Some proof of stake networks do require specialized hardware. Just understand if your network requires that and what the cost will be. And then some networks actually have different ways to earn rewards. So for example, on Celo, you can earn rewards by attestation, which is essentially running like a Twilio service that allows people to attest that they are who they say they are through SMS text messages, or running relay nodes to broadcast transactions on the network. So if maybe you're not comfortable running a validator because you don't maybe have the security credentials to secure it, there might be other ways to participate in these networks that don't require as much risk, they don't require as much security, and so you might be able to meaningfully participate and earn rewards in other ways. And then if there are multiple ways to earn rewards in a given network, figure out which one is the most profitable. If you start crunching the numbers, you'll find that out, and then you might want to just double down on that one method and invest your efforts there because it's more profitable than validating on that network. And then the other thing to mention is that some proof of stake networks are just more difficult or easier than others. And so as you play with the testnets, you'll start to learn which ones are challenging, which ones are easier, which ones have better documentation and tooling, which ones are lacking that, and you'll start to be able to make some decisions about, how much of my time is this going to require, how much effort, how much energy, and you'll be able to do some opportunity cost calculations, because ultimately, if there's a dozen of these networks launching this year, and you're running a small validator as a service startup, you probably can only support a few of those, and so you'll need to figure out which ones give you the best opportunity, which ones are going to require a lot of effort and maybe not as profitable. Okay, so next, we want to understand the risks. So you want to understand all the risks involved with validating on a given network and figure out mitigation for each of those risks, or if you need to mitigate. You might just decide that's not a real big risk, so I'm not going to worry about mitigating it. So for example, slashing risks. You can mitigate that by investing in security, both physical security, making sure your colo or your data center, your cloud environment has really good physical security, so you can't get unauthorized access to your HSMs, or virtual security in the form of just good cybersecurity and controls. Make sure you have a good business continuity plan. The last thing you want to find out is that your data center burned down, or your even maybe the office you work out of or your house had a fire or a flood, and you can't operate your validator now because you don't have a location to operate it from. So just have some business continuity plans in place. This includes things like backing up your private key material used by your validators, making sure you have offline paper copies or offline wallets on air-gapped machines for cold storage, that type of thing. And then legal and financial. get some good legal and tax advice to make sure you're in compliance. Proof of stake validation is a brand new financial product, and there are many regulations that make it challenging to launch a proof of stake validator service. So you want to just understand what those regulations are and make sure you don't need like a money transmitter license or something, because there are some jurisdictions where you might need a money transmitter license. And so you want to understand what the risks are involved there. So the real takeaway here is that if you understand these risks early, you can prevent costly mistakes down the road that might lead to total business failure. I've actually seen a few validators of service startups that have failed due to slashing, and they lost their bond. So it's unfortunate. It's happened to a couple of them where they got hacked. And a good example of this just happened recently. Norn Delegate, which is a Russian delegation service on the Tezos network, they got hacked, and the hacker transferred their bond out of the validator, and they were not able to get enough funding to basically recapitalize their bond. And so they had to shut down and tell all their delegators to delegate away from them. And even if they were able to recapitalize their bond, their private key material had been compromised because they got hacked. So it's questionable as to whether they should even ever start that validator again. In fact, what they probably should do at that point is start a brand new validator and burn the private key material for the old validator, because it's basically compromised. So that's something you never want to have happen. And if you understand the risks ahead of time, you can avoid those costly and potentially disastrous or existential events, really. The next thing is determine the profit conditions. So figure out if you can be profitable at various expense ratios, currency price points, and delegation amounts. So this is pretty important. You want to just basically put all these numbers in a spreadsheet and play with them. So start with really simple models, and you'll start to add more complexity to your models as you go, as you progress. But if you model all these various profit and loss scenarios, it'll actually help you to understand how difficult or challenging or easy it will be to become profitable. And so I'll just show you a very simple example here. This is a really simple P&L modeling, but let's say, let's look at the top one. Let's say you've calculated your annual expenses, basically $10,000 a month. And if you get 5 million in delegated tokens, and the token price is $4, and the network returns an annual rate of return of about 8% to validators, and you charge a 10% fee, then your profit will be roughly $40,000 a year. Now, if the price of that token drops to $2, you're now operating at a loss. So you want to kind of come up with these different thresholds in your mind of how much delegation do I need to be profitable, and at what fee, and at what price rate, because the price of crypto will always fluctuate unless you're validating a stable coin or something like that. And so in this scenario, you can see that if the price drops to $2, but I'm able to increase my delegated amount up to 10 million tokens, so I'm actually profitable again. So you can kind of start playing with these numbers and just adjusting your fees dynamically, adjusting your estimates for how much delegation you'll be able to achieve, and adjusting your estimates for what you think crypto prices will do in the next few months. And you can start to kind of figure out if you're going to operate at a profit or a loss. And this is really important. You need to do this for every network you're going to participate in, because each one of them is going to have wildly different economics. And these are some simple P&L modeling, but you can make this as complex as you want. And then the next thing I want to cover is really just like, how do you get involved with the networks you've identified? So let's say you've identified a few that you want to get involved with. What's the next step? So I recommend you start with your strengths. So there's many different ways to get involved with these networks. You don't have to just run validators. But if you're good at infrastructure and DevOps, start by standing up a validator. If you're strong with smart contracts, look for networks that support programmable staking. Maybe you want to build a staking smart contract that offers some unique characteristics. Maybe, there's so many cool things you can do with smart contract staking. If you're good at economics and game theory, look for networks where that's an advantage. There are networks where, like Polkadot, for example, where economics and game theory come into play, because you want to nominate as many validators as possible into the consensus set. So you want to nominate, effectively each account can nominate up to 16 validators, And if you get into the consensus set, then every validator gets an equal amount of stake and rewards. So there's this game theory exercise where you want to make sure you're nominating with enough stake on each validator to get in the consensus set, but you don't want to nominate with too much stake because now you're not optimizing for the maximum number of validators in consensus. So there's some really interesting game theory questions around some of these networks. And if you're good at that type of thing, if you're good at economics, you could probably launch a really successful validator on some of these networks. So there's other networks that are looking for tooling. In fact, almost all of these networks need help with tooling because they're so new. Build open source tooling and help support these networks launch. So if you find the right opportunities to contribute where your unique skills actually differentiate and give you an advantage over the other validators, you're going to go far. You're going to do really well because maybe you're not an infrastructure expert like I am. Maybe you're good at your software engineering. You want to write open source software for some of these projects. Many of them are giving away grants, and even if you don't want to operate a validator, you could get a grant and you could perhaps make just as much profit as operating a validator through the grant. All right, so the next thing is really around build that tooling, apply for grants. So you'll quickly learn what's missing when you get involved in these communities. So when you get involved in some of these test nets, you're going to find really quickly they need block explorers. In a brand new network, you can't see transactions without looking at a node and running RPC calls against it. You probably want to look at a block explorer so you can actually see what's going on, who's sending and receiving money. Building validator tooling, other quality of life improvements for validators. All of these things are really necessary for these networks as they launch. And so you can differentiate yourself by building that tooling. And if you're a validator, this also helps you acquire delegations because the delegators typically are very savvy and they've researched crypto and they've researched these networks and they chose to invest in those networks because they believe in them. And so if you're providing a valuable service, if you've contributed to the open source projects that help that network, those delegators are likely to delegate to you because they can see that you're contributing and you're not just in it for pure profit motives. So the real takeaway here is that if you learn what tooling is missing, and you contribute to the open source where you can actually apply for grants from foundations, and you can actually it will help your delegations as well. So I just want to highlight a couple areas where I think there's a lot of impact you can make. So for example, Tezos Foundation has a grants program. The network's already in mainnet, so there's no incentivized test nets, but they have this grant foundation program where they've really been funding a lot of tooling around the ecosystem. So this is as of as of August 2019. So since then, they've actually issued a lot more grants. But you can see they issued over $37 million in grants last year, and that's pretty significant. So these grants are going to really small open source contributors and validator as a service companies. And so there's a lot of, and also educational people that are educating others in the ecosystem. So there's a lot of opportunity, and these foundations have pretty large treasuries. I think Tezos Foundation has something like 650 million worth of Bitcoin in their treasury. So they have a lot of money they want to deploy. They have a lot of capital they want to deploy to help the ecosystem grow. So this is a great opportunity. And then I also want to highlight Coda Protocol's Genesis program because I think it's really unique. Just full disclosure, I'm an advisor to Coda Protocol, but one thing that's really unique about this Genesis program is the quantity of tokens they're giving out is really large. So they're actually going to grant 6.6% of the total token supply to 1,000 community members that participate in the testnet. So if you meaningfully participate in the testnet, you're going to get 66,000 tokens that will vest over some period of time. But this is actually significantly larger than any other incentivized testnet I've seen. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to not only participate in one of these testnets, but actually get a meaningful amount of stake that could be worth a significant amount of money in the future. So I want to do like a quick demo of this. And I can talk a little bit about what some of the unique characteristics of Coda are, but I won't spend too much time. We'll get into the Q&A really shortly. So let's see here. Let me figure out how I can share another window. Let's see. Cool. All right, so I just want to show you how easy it is to get involved with Coda. If you want to run on the testnet, if you're on a Mac, you can simply do a brew install Coda protocol Coda. And this is kind of what I mean when I say like some of these are easier to participate in than others. You really appreciate some of the networks that have gone to great lengths to make quality of life easy for validators that are just getting started in these networks. So if you're on a Mac, you can just install Coda really quickly like that. They have an Ubuntu package as well if you're on Linux. And then once you've installed it, you can simply run a node like this, and I can have a Coda daemon up and operational in just a few seconds. So it kind of gives you an idea of, wait, it's not sharing that other tab. Okay, hold on. Hold on a second. I will, the beauty of live demos, we'll do it in this tab. So that's, well, the Coda daemon crash. The beauty of live demos. But I just wanted to show really quickly, kind of how easy it is to get involved in some of these test nets and how to, how to kind of participate. So let me go back to, oops, sorry. Let me go back to the Q&As. Okay, so please ask your questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. Let me just scroll up a little bit to try to find. Oh yeah, my node actually did start. Sorry, I was running in 2 windows at the same time. It actually did start. So I guess I shouldn't have run 2 at once. That's my fault. Yeah, ask away. Let's see. Let me scroll down. So no, I didn't make, to answer your question earlier, Sergio, I did not make $1.4 million in atoms. I made 1,500 atoms, which I think at the time were worth like $4 each or something. And then I got 330,000 delegated, which means I can earn fees for validating on their behalf. So it's not the same as owning the token, but a 330,000 atom delegation still gives me a bit of income, more than enough to pay for the cost of the infrastructure I have to operate the validator. So it's definitely profitable. Let's see, how about specification of CPU and memory needed? This is a question from Bernardo, sorry. It varies depending on which network you're operating on. It varies wildly. Some of these networks can operate on really low-end compute hardware like Raspberry Pi, and some of them require really high-end servers with 64 cores and 256 gigs of RAM and GPUs and things like that. So I think it varies wildly. And so you need to, the best way to do this is to test and kick the tires. Also be aware that requirements change over time. I think Cosmos Hub 1 and 2, I was able to operate with a pretty small validator that only had something like 4 gigabytes of RAM. But when Cosmos Hub 3 launched, the memory requirements increased. And so during the upgrade process, I had to basically double the size of my validator. So just keep in mind that compute requirements will change over time as the protocols improve and as new features are launched. So you might want to build that into some of your P&L modeling. Let's see, there's a lot of chatter about Discord. Yeah, trustless Discord would be amazing. Actually, I think decentralized Discord would be awesome too. Somebody should build that. Someone made a meme about me. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to check that out later. I'll open that in a new tab so I can watch that in the background. And then let's see, what other questions? Where's the best place to find grants? So I think finding grants is a bit unique in that you need to spend time with the community actually learning what's needed, and then going out and building that thing or putting together a solid grant proposal. And that could actually be an entirely new session on like how to write a grant proposal. I think that'd be a great session for one of these conference sessions. But yeah, basically you do need to do some research, figure out what's missing in the community tooling or what open source project you could contribute uniquely that would help the network. And then you need to kind of build that thing or apply for a grant to help you get funding to build that thing. Is the gold of the background real gold? No. I have a green screen and I'm actually just showing a picture of a gold bank vault. I wish it was real. Let's see. Oh, how much memory needed for MacBook Pro? I think you just need four CPU and 8 gigs of RAM for Coda to run that. Could you explain more about how to get free resources from AWS or Google Cloud? Yes, I can. Let's see. So basically, what you want to do, let me share a different screen if I can. How do I do that? I'm not sure how to share a different screen. Hey, can you guys hear me now? Can everyone hear me? No? Hold on a second. Just a second. Let me fix this. Change cam and mic. Can you hear me now? Yes? Okay, it's working? Okay, good. All right, so I don't know, sorry about the technical difficulties. I got somehow kicked out of the video. But I was just describing how to apply for AWS Activate credits and Google Cloud credits. Did anybody hear any part of that, or was I talking to myself, basically? Yes, how far did we get? So I was talking about AWS Activate, and actually, let me share the landing page. Let's see. Please repeat. Okay, good. I will share the landing page. So basically, to apply for these credits, you can just Google AWS Activate, and you'll find this landing page that will help you get started with AWS Activate. You need 3 things to apply for these credits. So the first thing you need is you need to be a student at a university or a startup accelerator, incubator. And so if you're going to school right now, this should be really easy for you. Or if you're not in university right now, you might be able to just go to a local crypto accelerator and talk to some of the VCs there. But basically, you just need to be a member of a startup accelerator, and then you need a website. So you could just create your own website on Squarespace or something simple. You don't need to be a professional web designer. And then you need an email address that has your own domain name that's not like an @gmail.com address. So if you have those 3 things, you're a student at a university, or you can apply at a startup incubator, or you also have a website and you have an email address that's not @gmail.com, then you can apply for these cloud credits, and you can get up to $100,000 for 1 year of credits. So the program they offered me 2 different programs. One was I could get $100,000 in credits that lasted for 1 year, and the other one was I could get $5,000 in credits that lasted for 2 years. So I actually chose the 2-year program for $5,000 because I wasn't sure I could spend $100,000 in cloud credits. And that 2 years, $5,000 credits actually gave me enough credits to operate most of my Cosmos validators outside of like the Tendermint KMS stuff I had to run at home. But for all the cloud infrastructure, that pretty much covered it. Now my credits have since run out, but I'm still profitable on the Cosmos validator. Google Cloud also has this similar program. So you can many startups actually do this where they'll run out of credits on one provider and then they'll just switch to another provider. So this is always an option to you. You can get credits from another provider after you run out on one. So this is a great way to actually launch your validator as a service startup because it means there's almost no risk to you. If you know how to do really good stuff with computers, if you can stand up validators, if you're good at software engineering, if you're good at infrastructure and DevOps, and then you can actually do this, and Amazon and Google will pay the bill for your first year of operation. So that's a pretty great opportunity. So that's kind of how you get involved with the AWS Activate credits. If you're not a member of an incubator, I'm actually going to try to work with Shinju and the organizers at Dystopia Labs that set up this conference to try to get Amazon and Google connected so that they can actually start issuing these credits directly to participants in these conferences. I think this is a great opportunity because it's actually really good business for Google and Amazon, because if you build a validator as a service startup on their platform, you're probably going to stay on their platform, and you're probably going to become a paying customer after your credits run out. So it's a great opportunity to build at low risk, and it also gives you, a free start to your validator as a service. Also, especially if you're operating these incentivized testnets, you might get free tokens as well. So you could be profitable with very low upfront cost. Cool. Let's see, more questions. Is there any documentation for setting up Tezos private and Sentry nodes? I can try to find some good documentation. I'm not sure. There's probably something out there on the internet. I can try to find some. Oh, it looks like someone also already posted a link, Mike Reinhardt. Thank you, Mike. Mike from Obsidian Systems. Thanks for the quick link there. And in year 2, we need to pay back 100K. No, Satya, to answer your question, you do not have to pay back the credits. These are given to you free to start your business. And so, yeah, you can these are basically given to you by the cloud providers because number 1, they want you to learn their platform. And number 2, they want you to build your business on their platform, because some of the largest customers on AWS and Google were actually startups. I mean, these are like really large startups like Lyft and others that were like an Airbnb, and these startups were actually built with like cloud credits. It's hard to believe that in like the early days of Airbnb, they were, getting free cloud credits, and they were super scrappy and probably living off ramen noodles in their dorm room or something. But it's actually a really great opportunity to build a startup. Any other questions? feel like we wrapped up a little bit early because we finished the previous session early, but I'm happy to hang on the line and answer more questions. All right. Oh, I like this Neo Kung Fu meme. This is cool. I know proof of stake. This is great. I felt like that in the past. You know, at different jobs when I was learning really fast, I felt like Neo sometimes, where I just like had to learn new skills all the time. What's the application process like for Amazon credits? Yeah, so you choose your Activate provider. Like this is who your VC is, right? Like I'm just going to choose like A16ZC just as a, or I don't know, just one of, you pick one of these, and then I think there's a quick application. Yeah, here it is, this online form. Wait, sorry, this is different. This is for Activate providers. I think there's a quick way to apply here. Where is it? Okay, actually the way to do it is, sorry, if you are, so you want to talk to your either someone at your university that administers this program, or someone at your incubator accelerator that can get you connected. They can send you a link to the sign up page. So, and like I said, I'm going to work with Shinju and the organizers at Dystopia Labs to try to get Amazon connected to this conference so that we can get everyone who wants it credits. I think Amazon would love the opportunity. Can you, let's see, what about accounting and taxes? Nikita asked that. So it really varies depending on where you live. There's no one size fits all. But if you're in the US, you know, you should talk to an accountant, and I would recommend setting up like an LLC or some type of a company that can, like it could be like a sole proprietorship or an LLC or an S corporation even. So you want to talk to someone that can help you set that up, whether it's an accountant or an attorney. And then you're going to want to budget, you know, some annual expenses or maybe even monthly expenses to do your books for the accountant. And if you're just starting, it shouldn't be a huge expense. You shouldn't have a lot of books to do, but as you grow and, you know, if you hopefully someday become really successful and have, you know, dozens of people working there, you're going to obviously need maybe full-time accountants and things like that. Let's see. Can you explain how you set up your validation service? So I'm a bit of a unique case in the sense that I don't actually run a validation service myself. So I designed and built the infrastructure for the Tezos Foundation validators, and then I work at Coinbase Custody helping them build their validator services. But just as a hobbyist, I've participated in a lot of these test nets because I want to learn them in my own time, because it helps me in my day job at Coinbase and also working for the Tezos Foundation. And so I like to kind of experiment as a hobbyist. And even if you're not doing this because you want to start a professional validator as a service company, it's a really great way to kind of build a passive income stream and kind of build a side hustle if you want. You know, you don't necessarily have to build like a full-time job or a startup out of this. You could just make this a lifestyle business. Maybe you want to be a digital nomad and travel the world and not have to worry about, you know, making a daily paycheck or something. So this is a great opportunity because proof of stake is a steady income stream. Once you're validating and you have delegations, the income is pretty steady. So it's a great opportunity to build passive income streams. Does AWS have tutorials for how to set this up on AWS? Probably not. There are some blockchain services, managed blockchain services at AWS, but they're mostly geared towards Ethereum and Hyperledger. So they're kind of designed for people building private blockchain, enterprise blockchain networks for use cases like that. So I'm actually collaborating with some of the folks at the Tocqueville Group. Tocqueville Group is a part of, they're funded by the Tezos Foundation, and they help to do business development for Tezos. And we're going to launch some of the same CloudFormation automation and scripts that we use for Tezos Foundation validators. We're going to share those with the community. We're just in the process of actually documenting that setup. So I think in the next month or so, I can share links to documentation and free CloudFormation scripts that will help you launch your own nodes, your own Tezos nodes on AWS. And this is actually just, we're building this for security token issuers so that they can run node infrastructure in a really easy way. Can I share my Twitter handle? Yeah, I'll just put it in Slack. I don't have a blog post about this specific topic, but we'll share the slides with everyone after the session. Satya has a conceptual question. In mainnet, when you stake, how long is the stake locked for a block to be validated? And in that time frame, if the price goes up, then does it mean you lost money? So yeah, Satya, good question. So all of these networks are different, but basically when you stake, you're required to put up a bond or deposit in order to stake. And that basically means you're long that asset. You own some of those tokens. So if the price of those tokens goes up, you actually profited just by owning them. If the price goes down, you had a loss just by owning them. So if the price goes up, you actually did pretty well because you're holding all of these tokens as a bond. So that's kind of how it works. Wendell, I'm pretty sure MS Azure also has a similar program to AWS and Google. So you could easily get credits from all three providers if you wanted to. So are you doing this on home computers or mostly on AWS? Mostly on AWS, although I do have, I have some Intel NUCs that I use with UBHSMs with Tendermint KMS to do like remote signature generation. So I kind of like use those as at my house over a VPN. My validators run in the cloud, and then they get signatures from my UBHSM. Have I applied for a Tezos grant? No, I have not personally applied for a Tezos grant. I contracted for the Tezos Foundation as a contractor, so I wasn't part of the grant process. I actually haven't reviewed grants either because I'm not a core member of the Tezos Foundation. But I think it might be a great idea to have someone from Tezos Foundation actually do a session at the next conference like this about how to write grant proposals, because I think many people would like to do that, and they would love for more grant proposals to be submitted. Can you talk more about your side hustle company? Do you have other business partners or staff? Yeah, actually, when I started Blockscale, it was my brother and I. So my brother's a software engineer, and he's had a background in crypto for quite some time as well. And we both had our day jobs. I was working at Amazon at the time, and he was working for Mainframe, which is an Ethereum smart contract platform. And we both kind of did this on the side. And when we were building the infrastructure for Tezos Foundation, it was a lot of fun. We were working nights and weekends to build it all out. And then when I came to Coinbase, they were generous enough to let me continue to operate my side business with restrictions. I can't bring on new customers besides Tezos Foundation, but they were gracious enough to let me continue operating the Tezos Foundation validators, mainly because they don't want to force Tezos Foundation to select new validators overnight. They want to give them time to decentralize their own tokens over time. Let's see, more questions. I'm always looking for alternatives for founders, some who want a lifestyle biz versus those that want hyperscale and actually need capital. Yeah, that's a great point, Aaron. I think you're absolutely right. Like for our side hustle, we actually never got VC funding. I was able to get the free cloud credits from AWS because I knew someone that worked at Amazon in the blockchain, in the VC space in Amazon, and they were able to just kind of get me the credits. And so we were actually bootstrapped and profitable from consulting revenue. We didn't actually have to take funding. And so I took kind of a different path, but many people take venture funding, and I think that's a totally fine option. But also, you might not need it if you have cloud credits and you are capable of doing most of this on your own. You might just be able to start a side hustle and be bootstrapped and profitable through incentivized testnets and grants and things like that. For adding layers of security to staking, do you have any top security protocols you'd recommend or that you'd like, or are there companies that you want to integrate with their services into staking validation operations? When you say security protocols, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, Brian, but I can talk a little bit about, there's some tooling that I really like that we've used. For example, one piece of security tooling that we use at Tezos Foundation is Sumo Logic. It's a software as a service, it's a logging service. We send all of our audit logs there, and basically every event from every validator and every node that Tezos Foundation operates. And we can do some really interesting security analytics on that. So for example, if anyone ever logs into one of our AWS accounts from a non-United States IP address, I'll immediately get an alert and know about it. If anyone ever gains access to one of our accounts which has HSMs in it, I will know about it. So there's really interesting things you can do with security tooling. I'm a big fan of like defense in depth and all those things. If you have some examples of what you mean by protocols, I'm happy to share. Oh yeah, that's a great, Shinju has a comment. Caleb Cow, president of Tesla Southeast Asia, will be teaching a workshop tomorrow at 8 p.m. PST, sorry. That's a great opportunity to kind of learn more about how to launch Tezos validators. Yeah, with all the respect, I like Sumo Logic. Maybe it's slow, but I don't have a huge amount of log volume. I have, you know, a few gigabytes of logs a day. I don't have terabytes of logs, but it seems to work really well for me. And I like the aspect of, like, you know, being able to set up automated alerts for things I really care about. You know, for example, one of the things I was able to do is we had this kind of race condition where sometimes the remote signers would start throwing errors, and they'd start throwing HSM client errors with our PKCS11 library. And so I was able to just really quickly set up an alert for whenever I see that error in a log file, I know about it, and able to bounce the remote signer until we worked on a fix for it. So there's some pretty cool stuff you can do. I could go pretty deep on the infrastructure side if you want to talk more. Yeah, security is so important. Trying to understand the precautions to stay safe. I definitely recommend watching my session from earlier, and also watch Hendrik's session from Service One. His session was great on validator security. Yeah, it's a evolving area, and I think everyone is the security bar continuously evolves and increases, and so it's exciting community to be a part of, because we're always coming up with new and creative ways to improve the security of the consensus model in these networks, and it's exciting to be a part of that. Hero says, "Look, thank you for suggestion tooling and grant." You're welcome. Cool. Well, Shinju, I think we've probably answered most of the questions. Thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully this was informative, and it's been fun to be a part of the session today.
Yeah, Luke, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you. And this is his last session of the day. As he mentioned, he had spoken twice before. So definitely check out those sessions. They are live right now. So just if you guys click there's a sessions like button over here. Look, you click more, and then you'll find his sessions there. So thank you so much, Luke. Really do appreciate it. And we will stay in touch.
Thanks. Looking forward to the sessions tonight and tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a good one.